Hi, my name is Huib Dijkstra, End User Computing Specialist at VMware.
And I'm Joris Adriaanse, Business Development Manager at Fondo.
Thanks again for watching this training video series. In this episode, we'll finish the branding in Workspace ONE Access, we will configure the hub services, and we're going to create a couple of configuration profiles in Workspace ONE UEM.
So we noticed that during the enrollment in the previous videos, we didn't authenticate through Workspace ONE Access, but through Workspace ONE UEM. So let's fix that first. We'll go to Groups and Settings, All Settings, Enterprise Integration, and Directory Services. To make sure we can enroll the device through Workspace ONE Access, we need to enable SAML authentication. At this moment, we don't need it for admin access or for the self-service portal, we only need it for enrollment. So here we can import the settings from Workspace ONE Access. For that, we'll go to the Workspace ONE Access console, go to Identity and Access Management, press Setup, click on the last tab, Workspace ONE UEM, and at the bottom, this is the one we need to enable, and press Save. So for later on, we'll also need the compliance check. So besides those settings, we need the XML with all the configuration in it for Workspace ONE to be the identity provider. For that, we'll go to the catalog, press the settings button, and select the SAML metadata. Here you have the identity provider metadata, and that will be saved or will be shown as an XML. We'll press right click, save link, and save it as an idp.xml. We'll go back to Groups and Settings for the directory integration for Workspace ONE UEM, and we'll upload the XML file. Press Save, and I press Save here. So you can now see that all the information that was coming from the XML has been imported. So now we should be able to enroll a device .
Alright, so let's finish up the branding of Workspace ONE Access. In a previous episode, we did the branding of Workspace ONE UEM. Now we will do the end user part, so Workspace ONE Access. I'm going to go to the administration console. I'm going to click Identity and Access Management. And then click Setup. And here I have a tab called Custom Branding. So here you can change a couple of things. You can choose a different favicon. You can even change the product name or the company name. For now, we'll just change the company name. I think this looks quite nice. I'll hit Save. And then there's a second tab as well, called in the sign-in screen. Here you can change the logo, which I will do. We'll put the Fondo logo in there. So, and you can change the colors and the color scheme. So we're gonna go with the same color scheme as Workspace ONE UEM. So white and blue. And I'm gonna click Save. So next up, I'll go to the user portal. I'll click Sign Out. And as you can see, the scheme has changed.
So next up, we're going to configure hub services. This will provide us with additional services in both Workspace ONE UEM and Workspace ONE Access. To configure this, first you go to Groups and Settings, go to Configurations, scroll down a little bit and click on Intelligent Hub. Here you'll see an overview of the current made settings, for example your URL for your Workspace ONE Access, and your catalog settings. We'll press Launch to go to the settings, and Huib will take over from there.
So once you've hit the Launch button and you're in the Hub Services console, you can select the Customization tab. Here we will turn on People Integration. This will add a People tab to the Hub experience for the end user. In the People tab, end users can search for colleagues and co-workers. We're also going to enable the Custom tab. Here you can enter a web page or an intranet page. In our case, this is going to be the Fondo web page. And we're going to have that button last of all the tabs. We're also going to keep the app rating enabled, so end users can rate different apps in the portal. And we're going to leave the favorites enabled. And because in the next episode we're going to integrate Workspace ONE with Horizon, we're going to also enable the virtual apps on the different devices. So once I've hit save, I'm actually going to go to the Branding tab. Because the Hub Service integration adds a new end user experience to the Workspace ONE portal, we also need to update our branding. So this is going to be Fondo Tech. We're going to leave it called Intelligent Hub. We're going to select a new logo. And we're going to change a couple of the colors. And that's it for the branding. So once I've hit save, we're gonna go check and in a couple of minutes, because this sometimes takes some time. So in a couple of minutes, we'll check the result. All right, so let's check our branding. We can see now that the logo has been updated and the color scheme. The People tab has been added, so I can start searching for my colleagues. In my case, this is Eurus. So let's search for his details. These get synced from Active Directory, by the way. We now have the notification tab, or the For You tab. We'll start filling this in very soon. And we have the support tab as well. So it looks like everything went okay. As a tip for this week, if you accidentally messed something up in Workspace ONE Access, in the directory sync, in the customization of the logon experience, there's actually a trick which can help you log back on as a system admin under the system directory. So if you take a look at our new branding and experience in our demo environment, you can see that it automatically asks for an email authentication. However, if I remove the login in the URL and I've put in a 0 at the end after the / and I hit enter, you will see that I get redirected and I can log back on the system domain. In my case, admin Huib with my system credentials. This way I can fix any mistake I accidentally made, or sync our environment to a new AD or directory.
So to summarize, we've integrated Workspace ONE Access with Workspace ONE UEM. We've connected everything to Active Directory on-prem, and we've synced our accounts. We made enrollment available for macOS, iOS, Android and Windows 10. And we've done all the settings to make sure enrollment goes the way we want it to go. Everything's branded, all logos are there, and we're ready to go. So first, we're going to start with creating profiles for all the devices. So a profile is in fact a payload which contains settings that you push to an operating system. So the operating systems we're all using, we're going to create a different set of profiles, for example, to enable encryption, to set a passcode, to do some restrictions, and maybe configure the operating system the way we would like it to work. So let's dive in. So first let me start by explaining how the profiles work. In the UEM console, under Profiles and Resources, go to Profiles. And here you can press Add to add a profile. A profile consists of payloads, and a payload is a setting that you push to a device. Every operating system has its own set of payloads.
So I think when you hover with your mouse over the different operating systems, you can actually see the payloads, right? Yeah.
So you see quite a long list per operating system, and I'll show you how it works for example, iOS. So on the left side, you have a Find Payload option. Here you can press certain keywords if you're looking for something specific, for example, a home screen layout. So you always start off by giving your payload a name. So for example, this is for iOS, and this will be the restrictions we'll apply to the iOS devices. Deployment will say managed, because this is a setting we want to push automatically to the device. And we're going to set all allow removal to never because we don't want our users to remove this payload.
So you can select this for each different use case, right? So if you have a use case where users would be allowed to remove certain settings, then you would leave that on allow removal. All right.
Yeah, for example, if you have a Wi-Fi profile for a certain office that not everyone uses, you can allow them to remove that profile.
So and what happens if you set assignment type and you don't select auto? What happens then?
So the option there would be to have it optional or as a compliance. So optional makes it installable by the user. So he can go to the self-service page from Workspace ONE UEM and select the optional profiles he would need. For example, to add certain printers, certain Wi-Fi settings, maybe optional VPN settings, etc.
So in compliance, that helps with automatically remediating if your device falls out of compliance. Is that it?
Compliance means that this is a profile that needs to be installed to be compliant. So for example, if we want to offer a resource from Workspace ONE Access, I will say, well, you can only offer it when the device is compliant, then this profile needs to be applied and executed properly. So I've selected a smart group for all users. Next up, I'll show you how that works. But first, let's go to the Apple iOS restriction options. And it's quite a lot. It's an extensive list of everything that's possible to manage at an iOS device. So iPhone, iPod or iPad. So what we see first on the right side is all versions of operating systems. So these are options that were put in the operating system at a certain level. So for example, in iOS 7, Apple gave a manageable function to enable or disable force limited ad tracking. In iOS 8, they created an option to manage the setting for handoff. And so you can go through this entire list and you'll see every operating system has created its new features and possibilities. VMware has all the management APIs in their console, so everything that Apple made available is in here. So it's quite an extensive list. And you also see supervised in here as well. So you can supervise an iOS device either through Apple Business Manager or over the air or with the Apple configurator. These are the criteria that your operating system or your device needs to have for this setting to work. For example, if you want to postpone updates, that's on the top one. That's a feature that Apple put in here since iOS 11.3, and your iOS device needs to be supervised. So Apple Business Manager or Apple Configurator. And if you select this option, you can delay these updates up to 90 days. Let's put in 10, for example. If you want to disable the camera, you can deselect that function. And this way you can go through the entire long list with all the options.
Is everything always checkbox, Joris?
No, not everything is a checkbox. For example, if you go down, you can hide or show certain apps. So that's a free text field you can fill in. And if you want to, for example, set a Wi-Fi connection, then the network name you can configure is a field you can just enter here. You can also use some variables that we have from Active Directory. I'll remove Wi-Fi for now. So we've made some modifications to restrictions. I'm going to press save and publish, and it will show us the affected devices. So we got 2 iOS devices in our environment, and those are the 2 we're expecting. If you see a longer or a shorter list than you're expecting, you can press the cancel button and nothing happens. If we press the publish button now, it will push this setting to all the devices immediately, and there's no way of stopping that. These settings are now being pushed to our devices. And in the meantime, I'll show you how to use a smart group or an assignment group. So the settings we've pushed were sent to all users. You can create smart groups to push settings or applications to these devices. A smart group consists of a set of dynamic variables. For example, your Active Directory group that you're a member of, the type of device you have, the type of operating system you have, the ownership. For example, if your mobile device is corporately owned or is personally owned, you can create a dynamic set that always changes within this group. So for example, if a user changes his phone from iOS to Android, You, as an administrator, you don't have to do any work about that. The dynamic groups or the smart groups will modify the settings that are applicable to the user at that time. So for example, we can select our Active Directory group. We have one Active Directory group synced in here. We can combine this with ownership. So we only want the corporate owned devices from our users in the UEM user group. And for this group, for example, we only want to do a setting for iOS version, let's say 12 and higher.
So as a business owner, Joris, I could use this to create scenarios, right? So if I have a certain department which will have a lot of settings and devices, and I want to make it easy to manage that scenario, I can create a scenario for that department called a smart group and base all the users and devices on a couple of criteria. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Or if you have technical limitations. So for example, if you have a business application that only runs on iOS 12 or higher, you can assign it to iOS 12 and higher. And if a user doesn't update his iPad, he won't get that application offered. You can select device preview on the right side and it will give you a real-time overview. So for example, my iPad has been updated into version 13, so that applies, that comes within the criteria. But if we go to iOS 10 and higher, you see that iPad also joins in. You'll give your smart group a name that makes sense. So these are corporate owned iOS devices that are iOS 10 or higher. We'll press save and this dynamic group will stay there. So if we get a new iPad that isn't iOS 10 or higher, for example, if it's still an old one, it won't be applied to this group until we update it. So these are how the payloads work, and these are how the assignment groups and smart groups work.
Joris, a lot of customers ask me how Workspace ONE works. Does it apply settings to users or apply settings to devices? You just shown us how to create a smart group and assign settings to a smart group based on a couple of criteria. Is it also possible to create a smart group with just users or just devices?
Yeah, that's possible. We see that quite a lot, for example, for testing purposes. If you want to push settings to a certain set of devices, for example, based on serial number or a certain set of users, that starts still by creating a smart group, but instead of criteria, we'll choose the button devices or user. I'll give you a warning that all the variables will be removed. And for example, now we can search for all the devices that are yours or all the devices that are mine. You can still enable the device preview and here you'll see all our devices. So now you can create a test group, for example, tests for yours.
So the normal way to use smart groups would be to use criteria, but if you want to create a testing group or you have a special use case, then you can use the other tab.
Yep. If you have a certain set of users or a certain set of devices that you want hard-coded in there, it's not a problem.
So the correct answer to all my customers is basically both. You can, and preferably you combine everything in one smart group. So a couple of criteria, maybe a user group, and a certain pool of devices.
Yeah, if you configure this correctly, it will do all the work for you.
Another question, which I get asked a lot, is whether to combine all your payload settings into one profile or to create a profile for each payload setting. What would you advise customers?
So a single profile can consist of multiple payloads. For example, if you have a Wi-Fi connection where you want to set the SSID and you want to upload a certificate for that Wi-Fi connection, then it makes sense to have those two payloads combined in a single profile. Try not to combine profiles that don't have any correlation with each other, because a profile, if you update a profile, all the payloads that are in that profile will be removed from the device and reapplied. So for example, if you would do a passcode profile along with an email profile, and your CIO decides that the passcode needs to be higher in security, you modify the passcode payload and the email payload will also be removed and reapplied to the device. So all the users will see their email be removed from the device and put back a couple of seconds later.
So that's it for this episode. Today we discussed the creation of configuration profiles.
If you have any questions or comments, send us an email at questions@fondo.tech.
In the next episode, we'll discuss the integration of applications. So VDI Horizon applications, native Windows applications, and internal and external, meaning public store, integrations.
Thanks again for watching.
See you soon.